The regular 2015 Florida legislative session was filled with drama, disagreement, and an early adjournment. It took a special session, but legislators passed a $78 billion budget. Tonight, we'll discuss this year's session with local members of the Northwest Florida Legislative Delegation. We are live and interactive from the Phyllis and Mike Johnson studio. Legislative review, dialogue with the delegation is straight ahead.
This original WSRE presentation is made possible by viewers like you. Thank you.
And a very pleasant good evening, everyone. I'm Jeff Weeks. Thank you so very much for joining us. Since the passage of the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, the state of Florida has been at the forefront of the debate on how the law should be implemented and funded at the state level. 2015 would bring about what some have called a family feud. The Florida Senate on one side and the House of Representatives and the governor on the other. The sticking points were related to LIP, or the Low Income Pool, and Medicaid. The views so dissimilar, the House would adjourn early and leave the Capitol without a budget in place. Ultimately, a compromise was reached and the budget was passed in a special session. Tonight, we invite your questions for local members of the Northwest Florida Delegation. You can call us at 850-484-1223 or toll free at 1-800-239-WSRE, or you can email your questions to questions@wsre.org. Before I introduce our panel this evening, we would like to send out our condolences to the family and friends of the late Florida Senator, Dr. Darrell Peden. Dr. Peden was a physician by trade as well as being an attorney. He served Northwest Florida in the Florida House of Representatives and the Florida Senate. Dr. Peden passed away in June of this year. He was 69 years old. Tonight, we are joined by former Florida Senate President Don Gates. Senator Gates represents Senate District 1. He chairs the Appropriations Subcommittee on Education. Senator Gates' colleague in the Senate, Senator Greg Evers, was unable to join us this evening. Senator Evers chairs the Criminal Justice Committee and represents District 2. From the Florida House, representing District 1, Clay Ingram. Representative Ingram chairs the Transportation and Economic Development Appropriations Subcommittee. From District 4, Representative Matt Gates. Representative Gates is chair of the Finance and Tax Committee. From District 2, Representative Mike Hill. Representative Hill is vice chair of the Civil Justice Subcommittee. District 3's representative is Doug Broxson. Representative Broxson is vice chair of the Health Innovation Subcommittee. Gentlemen, welcome and thank you so very much for joining us this evening. Well, Senator Don Gates, you're a little bit outnumbered this evening.
I know how that feels.
So let me begin with you. Let me get you sort of to give us the 10,000-foot overview of exactly kind of what happened in this last session.
The state of Florida is a lot like our country in the sense that there are real divisions about what to do about health care and health care coverage. The Senate for a couple of years has had one point of view. The House of Representatives has had another. There are differences in that point of view, but also some similarities. All 160 members, both parties, both houses, want to improve health care coverage and health care access. The question has been how to do it. We couldn't solve it in the regular session, so we had to measure twice and cut once. And by doing a special budget session, we came back. We put more money into what's called the Low Income Pool, and that's Florida money that was held in Washington and not returned to us as we thought it should be. So we had to backfill with some of our own money. But the consequence of that is that we were able to still balance the budget, and hospitals like Sacred Heart here in Pensacola has $8 million more for uncompensated care than they did last year. Baptist has $4 million more. We balanced the budget, still were able to add historic funding for education and pay down our state's debt. So the good news is that even though we had some disagreements and we couldn't agree on all the details, we came up with a budget and we addressed the health care needs of the state of Florida.
Very good. Gentlemen from the House, would any of you like to add anything to that?
Well, what I would like to add to that, Jeff, is Florida has just recently become the third most populous state in the nation. Right. There's California, Texas, and Florida. We surpassed New York. And what's interesting is we just passed a budget of $78 billion. New York, with essentially the same amount of people, has a budget of over $140 billion. So that shows you what conservative leadership will do. in terms of having much less lower budget, meaning that there's more money in the taxpayers' pockets to spend how they want, and at the same time still taking care of all the needs of our citizens. As Senator Gates said, we funded education at its highest level ever. Healthcare needs were being taken care of, and our transportation and infrastructure is being taken care of. So it shows a real dichotomy there between conservative leadership and not conservative leadership, and leaving more money in the pockets of the people.
The other gentleman from the House want to add before we get into the viewers' questions?
Yeah, Jeff, I'll say this. I think Senator Gates hit the nail on the head with the potential $30 million impact locally if we had not backfilled LIP. We went from a really potential devastating situation to our local economy if that money had not been stayed in the economy, to winning there, and our hospitals are better off. And then I know we're going to get into this, but then when you look at a $400 million tax cut, and obviously Representative Gates and his committee need to take full credit for that, we came out in the end pretty good.
Okay, so it wasn't, I guess all of you would probably agree it wasn't necessarily pretty, but it got done.
Sure.
Is that a good way to go with it? Okay, very good. We have a lot of questions this evening that have been submitted by our viewers, so we're going to try to get to as many viewer questions as we can. And again, if you would like to ask a question of your legislators, you can do so either by calling in and asking your question off the air, and they'll forward it over to me, or you can email the question to questions@wsre.org. Okay, let me begin. A viewer's question: what issues/bills did the Northwest Florida delegation collaborate on during this past session that will positively impact our area?
Well, we collaborated on a number of issues that impact our military mission and those who have served in the military. All members of our delegation were very supportive of some efforts that we worked on to ensure that the military men and women who bravely serve this country are safe when they return home. ISIS, several months ago, published a list of 100 U.S. servicemen and women, and they published their home addresses and where their children went to school, and they asked their sympathizers to find those Americans and kill them in their neighborhoods. I had a call from one of the people on that list. He was a pilot, and he said, why aren't members of the military entitled to the same protections that we give our police and our judges and our corrections officers? So as a delegation, we made a priority out of protecting those folks when they're home. We passed a public records exemption, so anyone who has served in the United States Armed Forces after the 9/11 attacks will have the opportunity to have their personal information redacted from the public rolls, so they receive extra protection and are not susceptible to those aggressive actions by groups like ISIS.
Well, speaking of that, there's been an awful lot of talk here recently about terrorism, and typically we approach it from the federal level, but I have to ask, how concerned are you all at the state level? I mean, this has really been taken up a notch in recent months with discussions about what ISIS is doing and the others. So your thoughts on that?
One area we see this yesterday, I know we don't know the full cause of everything that happened yesterday, but our state information is stored at state data centers. And so we took a session back and continued the work this year of making sure that those data centers where all of our data is stored are physically secure, against obviously natural disasters, but also terrorist threats, and then that they're redundant and the virtual portion is protected too. And so I think that we've seen those attacks on states like South Carolina, Texas, Tennessee. We want to make sure that we are as bolstered as we can against those attacks, with regard to our virtual security and physical security.
And the consequences of terrorism, Jeff, affect people who live and work in Northwest Florida. I talked with a woman today who is the mother of a 3-year-old, and she deployed to Afghanistan, had to leave her 3-year-old. And when she came back, she was delighted to find out that this delegation had worked together to make sure that the children of military-connected families now will be able to get extra funding, extra help, extra support from their local school districts because of a military-connected student supplement that we work together to put in the education funding formula. It means that when mom or dad is deployed and a child needs extra help or support, they can get it. Or when a military member comes here, brings a family, their child's ready to go to school, if there needs to be screening or help or assistance with getting into an advanced class or a class where they might need some tutoring, that we take those extra precautions and extra steps to help military families. So terrorism has a lot of effects on Florida because we have here in Northwest Florida the home of 5 major military bases. but at the people who live and work here and are our neighbors and go to church with us and we see in the grocery store. They have families who are affected, and what we can do in the Florida legislature, what this delegation has done, is stand up for those families and try to help them.
I think we have 26 billion people connected to the internet. That is a major issue. All of our lives are interconnected with our bank accounts and everything that we do. And that is going to be an area that we're going to have to look at very carefully. I'm so glad that the military is working right in this area to make sure that we're protected, not only our government security, but personally we can have more security. That concerns me, that we're moving to a technological age where the way that it was for my father or my grandfather is so much different today, and it's going to be much different for my children and grandchildren.
I think the other frightening thing too is news reports here just in the past couple of days of how ISIS is actually recruiting through social media and having a lot of success, and that's frightening. Let me move on to a viewer's question. Since charter schools are public schools and some of them have gotten into financial difficulties, do you favor giving the district enough funds to oversee the budgets of charter schools? Second part of that question, should charter school teachers and other employees adhere to the same qualifications and standards as other public school employees?
Well, as chairman of the Education Appropriations Committee, let me first say that public school districts already receive extra funds to provide oversight and services to charter schools. Charter schools don't receive all of the funding per student that student is entitled to. 5% of it is held back and given to school districts to provide that kind of help and oversight. The problem, of course, is that we need to have more qualification and vetting of charter school operators, not only when they want to get into business in Florida, but making sure that they use the resources that they get for proper stewardship. So that's what we've been doing. We've sponsored legislation and passed it to be able to make that happen.
Okay. Let me jump over again to LIP funding. We talked about that a little bit in the beginning of the broadcast here, but we'll dig deeper into it. This is a viewer question. The viewer says, this question is specifically for Clay Ingram, Mike Hill, Doug Broxson, and Matt Gates. I wish to know from each of you why you believe that more than 800,000 low-income Floridians who pay taxes, who pay for each of your health insurance policies and also our millionaire governors, that's the viewer's question here, do not deserve to have health insurance also.
Well, they deserve to have health care. And the question is whether or not health care is more accessible to people through illusory insurance or whether it's more accessible by decreasing costs. I think we all agree that we would want those 800,000 Floridians and all 20 million Floridians to have access to reasonable health care. The Florida Senate had a view that if we focused on the insurance piece, that would be the most appropriate way. We want to get to the same outcome, but the Florida House decided that we wanted to focus on the costs that are inherent in health care. Why does an aspirin cost, upwards of $100 when it's received in a hospital? Why is it that people who want to invest their own money and go build a surgery center or a hospital can't do it without the government's approval? So we believe that free market approaches will drive down the cost of health care, and until you drive down cost, expanding insurance won't matter. You look at the state of California. They went from 8 million people on their Medicaid product to 12 million people on their Medicaid product. Then they had so many people on Medicaid, they had to cut the reimbursement rates to the providers, which meant that the providers left the marketplace and wouldn't see Medicaid patients. So it would be a cruel thing to do to the people of Florida to give them health insurance when they then couldn't go see a doctor. So that's why we're going to work together to try to bring down the cost of care, ultimately make sure that health insurance is affordable like car insurance is. And the more we put the consumer in charge, I think we'll be able to get there. So we all want to achieve the outcome. It's just a matter of what tactics will be most effective.
And
Jeff, go ahead, Clay. I'm sorry.
We've taken steps like trying to increase the number of community health clinics, trying to allow nurse practitioners under the supervision of a physician to see as many patients as possible for things that traditionally patients would go to an ER for, a sore throat, flu, cold, things like that. If we can, that's a way to tangibly reduce costs and provide access to care to those people that are currently uninsured.
And I would add to that, Jeff, that the viewer had the question of why didn't we just expand it to this large number of people. The thing is, they have to recognize that we were dictated of what that pool was going to include. It was dictated to us from the federal government that 37% of that expansion had to go to able-bodied adults. while we have on our waiting list right now here in Florida who really need the Medicaid and who it was intended for are disabled and blind. So our request was, can we at least put them as part of this expansion pool ahead of some of those who are able-bodied adults? The response from Washington, D.C. was no. You must have this amount of the population as part of that expansion. Well, that was unacceptable to us amongst a number of other reasons, and that was why I didn't support the expansion of Medicaid.
Jeff, in 1972, Florida was one of the last 3 states to opt in to Medicaid. The Fed said to us, if you'll do this, it will never cost more than 5% of your budget. This year, every member of this group was prevented from voting on 32% of our budget because it was earmarked to a program that we had no control over, that a legislature over 40 years ago made a decision on where we stood. I was not willing to tie the hands of future legislators when it's going to be 50% of our budget or 60%. That takes the ability to have quality education and quality roads. And I think each legislative team has the right to determine what the budget is for the state and not be controlled by federal dictate.
Okay. Let me get another viewer's question in, pretty close to what we were talking about, but maybe you just want to add a little extra here. The viewer is asking, what is the rationale for not working out a compromise with the state Senate on medical insurance for uninsured Florida residents when our tax dollars go to Washington and you won't accept federal dollars in return? And the viewer says, I don't accept the argument that you believe in smaller government. So,
well, let me take up from my colleagues in the House. We disagreed and voted differently on some tactical aspects of this issue. But as we look forward now to the next legislative session, which will begin very soon, we'll do committee meetings beginning in September, already there are efforts underway. I plan to be sponsoring legislation to bring some of the best ideas from the House of Representatives with some of the ideas from the Senate to try to improve health access, to drive down costs, and provide more opportunities for people to get covered services. There are opportunities in the Florida legislature to work together. We're not like Congress. We're not like the legislatures in many other states where they're deadlocked, they can't pass a budget, they just move on from one gridlock circumstance to another. We're going to work together on the healthcare issue next year, but listen, it's taken 35 or 40 years in Washington and they still don't have it right. So we're going to work on a Florida solution this year, and my hope is that it'll bring together some of the best ideas, just as your viewer said, some of the best ideas from both chambers.
very good. Here's a viewer question. Why are there sanctuary cities for illegal immigrants in Florida? And what is the legislature going to do about ending this?
Well, unfortunately, we've seen the state of Florida move in the direction of more entitlements for people who are here illegally. Every person that is sitting on this dais voted against legislation that extended in-state tuition to illegal aliens who are in our state. But unfortunately, every Democrat and a majority of Republicans even voted to have more entitlements for illegals, not less. So the headwinds are very strong when it comes to the type of reforms necessary to protect our citizens. When we observe what's happened in San Francisco, what's happened in Newark, New Jersey, where people have been killed as a result of these very heinous acts by people who should not be in our country, it ought to be a wake-up call for everyone living anywhere that a country without borders is not a country. We need to protect our borders, and within the state of Florida, we need to say that that process, that rule of law, has to have some dignity, and that people who are not here legally should not be here.
Okay. A lot of viewer questions this evening. Here's one regarding the military. The military has submitted their final environmental impact statement for training 232 days per year in Blackwater and Tate's Hell State Forest. If the military is turned down for training in the state forest, are there other lands being considered? I think she meant, I don't know, is there a Tate's Hell Forest? I don't know what that is, or is it the state? I don't know. There is a Tate's?
Yes.
Okay.
If there is one, it's in Representative Broxton's district.
I didn't know if there was a typo and it was supposed to be state. But anyway, go ahead.
One of the challenges that we have is that most of this property, such as in Blackwater, was given to us by the federal government. They had inside that lease certain requirements that they would always have access to. One was mineral rights and the other was military rights. So for them to come back to us as a community was really a courtesy that they gave us. they can use it if they want to. And many of us, I think, would tell them, if it gives us additional tools in securing this country, if they need Blackwater or if they need any other part of our panhandle, we're willing to give it to them to make it available so that we can be protected in the long run.
I would add to that, Jeff, that whenever land is given to the military like that for exercises, it goes through a litany of requirements before it can be used, including environmental impact and so forth. And it is determined that the type of training they will be doing there will have a minimal impact on the environment. And as Representative Broxton said, if it's going to make our military more ready for combat and for their operations, then I'm all in favor of supporting that.
Okay. Here's a question from a viewer. It says that what part of the water and land legacy funds will go toward beach renourishment, which not only kills that sea life living in that particular area, but also kills the shore life living along the shoreline, which is food for shorebirds. The viewer says this is not purchasing, maintaining, or restoring sensitive land. How can you defend this?
Well, not all beach renourishment projects are created equally. There are some that are absolutely necessary to preserving coastal communities, and absent that renourishment, we put the lives of human beings in jeopardy. There are other areas where we should not be renourishing, frankly. There were Northwest Florida renourishment projects that were recommended by the governor that the legislature chose not to fund for environmental reasons and private property rights issues that were implicated in those projects. So we take them on a case-by-case basis and evaluate where there is a true safety need, where there's a potential environmental impact, and we do the best we can to make sure that, that we balance all of those interests in preserving our coastlines and really what is the great economic asset of Northwest Florida, our beautiful beaches.
Okay. Here's a question about insurance, citizens insurance to be specific. When will the Northwest Florida delegation submit legislation to either do away with citizens insurance or force citizens to subsist solely on premiums collected from customers, like every private insurance company must do? The viewer goes on to say or ask, why are all insurance policies taxed to support a select few?
Well, being the insurance agent here as part of the delegation, I'll answer that. Citizens is moving in the right direction of shrinking. At one time, Citizens was the largest insurer in the state of Florida and the fourth largest in the nation with over 1.6 million policyholders. It is now down below, I think the last number I heard was close to like 400,000. So it's been a significant drop in the number of customers who are Citizens policyholders. What that has done then is there was an assessment that was placed on every policyholder's policy to pay for the storms that came in the state in 04 and 05. That assessment was retired early this year, sooner than it was scheduled to be, because of the shrinkage of the size of the Citizens policyholders. I believe that the goal of the state is to continue shrinking Citizens population. And I would like to see, for one, to get it down to zero and let the private market solely be represented in the insurance market here in Florida.
Here's one where Northwest Florida can take a victory lap to your viewer's question. Freddie Shins, who was my appointee to serve on the Citizens Board, led the effort, along with others on that board, to do exactly what Representative Hill just said. And that is now, contrary to the viewer's question, now there is no more surcharge on ordinary insurance policies in order to support citizens. That's been done away with because of prudent management, because of shrinking the book of business and getting citizens out of the business of competing in the private insurance market. It was exactly the right thing to do, and Freddie Shins, who was the Senate's appointee, led the effort, and if you see Freddie, thank him.
All right, sounds great. There are approximately 3 million non-party affiliate voters in Florida. Would you support an open primary where all candidates are on a single ballot regardless of party affiliation, and all voters get to choose the candidate of their choice regardless of party affiliation? If not, why not? Again, viewer question.
I grew up in an open primary state. My home state of North Dakota was an open primary state. And what happened was that we were able to have Democrats voting in the Republican primary, Republicans voting in the Democratic primary, and it led to the other party picking another party's nominees through a kind of organized nuisance. I happen to be a Republican, but I don't think that Republicans should pick the Democratic nominee. An open primary means everybody can vote in any primary they choose. If political parties are going to stand for something, if they're going to have a platform, be it liberal or conservative or moderate or whatever, they ought to be able to field their own candidates, and then voters ought to be able to say yes or no to those candidates. But it's wrong to have members of my party pick the Democratic nominee to have people go vote for somebody they think they can beat in a general election. That's chicanery, and I don't think that it works.
One of the issues that we have is that most people that run for office in Northwest Florida have to be Republicans. And the people that are Democrats or independents that will not be allowed to vote on that. Well, we have a very transportable process in voter registration. You could become a Republican for just the primary period and vote if you chose to do that. And then if you wanted to vote differently in the general session, you could. So that is really a kind of a red herring. If somebody wants to vote for a candidate inside of a primary, they have the flexibility to do that right now.
And I'll just follow up on that. We have had questions in the past of why we do not have any Democrats on the panel, and it's because none are elected here in the Northwest Florida, as far as the legislature is concerned, on the Northwest Florida Legislative Delegation. Question from a viewer. He says, I'm a 72-year-old Vietnam vet in constant pain. When over 55% of the folks voted for medical cannabis, why are you not taking action to pass Charlotte's Web for the kids? Matt, I'll get you to start.
Yeah, I usually get all the cannabis questions. I sponsored and passed Florida's first Compassionate Medical Cannabis Act, and first I want to thank the viewer for his service to our country. You know, we are on a journey of cannabis reform in this state, and I was so proud that every member of the Northwest Florida Legislative Delegation said, if we have a product that won't get anybody high, but could help, you know, whether it's veterans with PTSD, whether it's people with Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, whether it's people that are children, we want to make sure that they have the opportunity to access cannabis as medicine. Now that doesn't mean we want to become Colorado or California. I don't see that any other state in the country whose cannabis policy I particularly envy, and so we're going to have to create a uniquely Florida solution. The good news for the viewer is that yesterday the application period closed for people who want licenses to legally grow cannabis in the state of Florida. 28 different nurseries applied. I think in very short order the Department of Health will be issuing licenses. Unfortunately, the special interests have bogged down that process previously in lawsuit after lawsuit, but finally we're going to have cannabis grown in Florida as medicine, and we're not going to let politics or dogma guide where we go. We're going to let the research dictate what is the responsible decision, and I'm proud of my colleagues for standing with me and standing with the vulnerable people in this state.
Anybody want to add to that?
Well, I would add to it, in addition to that, Representative Gates was exactly right. This just recent session, the House passed legislation that would allow those who are terminally ill to be able to have access to experimental drugs, which may not necessarily have been passed by the FDA yet. But if it can provide relief to them in some form, or perhaps even improve their quality of life, then we say they should be able to have access to that. So for those who are in pain or suffering, we as a delegation, and everyone here voted for it, said that you should have access to those experimental drugs.
Okay. I'm going to combine two questions because they're pretty much in the same ballpark here. Is there going to be any legislation in Florida that will protect a pastor after the Supreme Court's ruling on same-sex marriage? That's question number one. The next viewer says, what are you as Florida's legislators doing to safeguard our religious freedoms in face of the recent decision of the Supreme Court of the United States? We will have to suppress our faith in order to be politically correct. So, hot button issue for sure, but your thoughts?
Well, the Pastor Protection Act is already being discussed. And, you know, I happen to be a Christian. There are other people who may have different faiths or no faith at all. I think it's an essential tenet of the American Republic that you ought to be able to practice your faith. And so if there is legislation that needs to be passed to make sure that a pastor or a priest or a rabbi can practice his faith and can engage in the religious rites of his faith, then I'm all for it. Now, we already did do an analysis of existing law And there is a body of law existing already in the state of Florida that's very strong in terms of protecting religious freedom. And we've had no pastor in Florida that I know of, maybe the viewer knows of one and could call us and let us know, but I know of no pastor, rabbi, or priest in the state of Florida who has been prevented from practicing his religious beliefs to this point. If we do have examples of that, not on the internet, not in someone's imagination, but real examples, then I say let's stand up and protect it. But as a Christian, I don't want the government coming into the door of my church and telling us how we're going to practice religion.
Well, that's something that, and I'm sure the other members, when they speak, that people are very concerned about. It's how quickly we've moved in this country to a social change. I think the Supreme Court's watching too much sitcom TV. They need to stay with the Constitution. We are going to see a lot of legislation presented this year that will speak to exactly what you're talking about. It's going to protect those people of faith and make sure that they have a right to stand up for what they believe. Whether you agree with what they believe or not, we have a right to have religious freedom. And as long as I'm there, I'm going to state that we are going to reinforce that through the legislative process.
And Jeff, to the viewer's question, I believe, and I don't know if the bill has actually been filed or is in the drafting stage, but Representative Scott Plakin from the Orlando area is working on that bill. That's something he's championed and either has filed or plans to file.
Only thing I would add to that, Jeff, is what everyone has said I agree with 100%. I think it also needs to be extended not just to clergy, pastors, rabbis, and so forth. It also needs to be extended to private businesses. If there are private businesses who, through their conscience, their moral conscience, would be infringed upon because of that Supreme Court's decision, then they should be protected also.
Okay.
And Jeff, Mike mentioned being the insurance agent. I'm the lawyer in the legislative delegation, and here is the risk associated with changing the law. Right now, Florida has a law as a result of the legislature in 1998 that says that pastors, private businesses, and others are protected if they are exercising genuine faith, and their faith is a guiding and fundamental tenet of the nature of their organization. Here's that law has been reviewed by the courts, approved, constitutional, and providing protection in Florida today. If we go change that law, we better make darn sure we do it carefully. Because what I don't want to do is I don't want to give liberal judges another bite at the apple to potentially invalidate Florida's existing protections for people of faith and nonprofit organizations and other organizations that are exercising their faith. So know that whenever we move one comma, change one word, it gives the courts another bite at the apple, and that could be something that could concern people who are conservatives and people of faith.
Okay. Here's, again, I'm going to kind of combine two questions because they're basically the same or similar. How can you, in good conscience, give tax cuts to yacht owners while refusing our federal tax dollars to fund insurance for the underserved and undercutting funding for land and water conservation? Talking about the amendment that was passed, and this person says was passed by 74% of the people of Florida. And again, same thing with the other question here. In November, the 2014 election, overwhelming 70-some-odd% of the voters supported Amendment 1, Florida's Water and Land Conservation Amendment. Why is the legislature chose to ignore the will of the voters by appropriating only $17.4 million for land acquisition instead of the $700 million that had been projected? And I know that's been a hot button issue across the state.
Well, there were a lot of things in that question. Let me take a couple of them.
Okay.
First of all, we appropriated $1 billion for water and land conservation and environmental purposes this year. Secondly, land acquisition itself wasn't 17 million, it was over 55 million. And so that needs to be, facts are stubborn things, and those are the facts. The other thing is that we provided tax credits in repairing yachts, not in order to give millionaires tax benefits, because they can take their yachts to Georgia or North Carolina and get them fixed, and they're still going to keep their yachts. My concern was the legislators who came to us and said, look, we've got people in our communities who are working in the marine industry, and they need jobs, and they'd be able to be competitive with the yacht basins and with the repair facilities in other states if we could have comparable prices. Give us a fair shot to have these people who are making $30,000 and $40,000 a year to have jobs. That's why I voted for it. But the other point is that Representative Gates led the effort across the legislature to pass $435 million worth of broad-based tax support so that every single Florida family got a tax cut this last year. I think it was the best tax cutting year and the best policies we've had, but I defer to my colleague from Niceville. Or from Fort Walton Beach.
That's right. You live in Niceville.
I live in Niceville.
I used to live there.
That's
You
right.
kicked me
I
out.
keep forgetting that he doesn't have his feet under my table anymore.
Every Floridian who has a cell phone, a TV, or uses the internet will see a reduction in their taxes. That was important to us. Tax cuts should not be another device for corporate welfare. They should be a way for everyone to participate in an improving economy. Last year, Florida had a $1.2 billion surplus that we got to have in our budget now. And we thought that giving a good share of that back to the people of Florida was better than just giving it to the people in government. Now, I got folks in my district who live in Destin and work on the waterfront, who sand down the boats, who paint them, who varnish them. These aren't millionaires. These are blue-collar folks. And we wanted to preserve their economic opportunity as well. So anytime we can use the tax code to create an advantage for all of the people of Florida, we want to do that by lowering taxes. And hey, if we get another surplus next year, I think that you'll see the Northwest Florida delegation again be some of the strongest advocates for lower taxes.
I had the honor of serving on a committee that Representative Gates chaired, the Finance and Tax Committee. And Representative Gates came up with a slogan which I agree with wholeheartedly: no tax is safe when it comes before the Florida House or the Finance and Tax Committee. The idea is the more money that we can leave in our our citizens' pockets, the better. There's not a tax cut that I don't like. Anytime that we can cut taxes and not have it go to the government, but instead stay with the people, I'll vote for it every time.
Okay. Let me come back to the Amendment 1, because I do know that there's been a lot of controversy around that. You guys want to sort of elaborate on that a little bit more, and that's the Florida Water and Land Conservation discussion.
Amendment 1 said that we ought to spend a specific portion of funds that come in from dock stamps on land and water conservation. And the amendment went on to list a whole series of allowable expenditures. And certainly purchasing land and taking it off the tax rolls and having government own more land was one of those purposes, but it wasn't the only purpose. And the legislature was required to spend at least $750 million on those purposes. We spent $1 billion. Now, the other thing to bear in mind is this is a 20-year-long project that Amendment 1 established. We've just gone into the initial year. Sometimes it's best not to run immediately to the buying and selling table with $1 billion burning a hole in your pocket to create a circumstance where it's a seller's market. Now sellers of environmentally sensitive land know that there's a willing and anxious buyer. But we've got 20 years to pick up the land that we need to. Let's pick up the most environmentally sensitive soonest, and let's dump some of the land that's not environmentally sensitive so we have even more funds available for water and land conservation. The other night, Representative Gates and I were in front of the Destin City Council to tell them about the funding that this delegation had worked together to secure to take care of stormwater runoff in a very vulnerable part of Destin. And we used some of the Amendment 1 money to do it. Now, if we hadn't, that dirty stormwater would have run into the Destin Harbor and into the Gulf of Mexico and Choctawhatchee Bay, polluted our waters, and made it more difficult for us to do the kind of land and water conservation and protection that we want to. So there are a number of allowable purposes, and I think that we're following Amendment 1 faithfully.
Okay, very good. Here is a question regarding jail sentence reform and prison felony reform. And again, I'll combine these two questions. Would you support legislation to restore citizens' rights who have been convicted of a felony, with the exception of murder or sexual offenses? So that's part of the question. The other part is, she says, mandatory minimum sentencing has filled our jails with nonviolent offenders. Would you favor new regulations which would provide alternatives such as fines, community service, in-home detention for those nonviolent offenders?
I'm the immediate past chairman of the Criminal Justice Committee, and we took a different view. We thought that there were some people that weren't spending nearly enough time in prison. We passed some of the most comprehensive and toughest laws regarding violent sexual predators that America has ever seen. Because unfortunately, the state of Florida had released nearly 600 violent sexual predators that went on to kill 13 Floridians, rape over 120 women, and molest over 1,400 children. We're now the only state in America that has a 50-year mandatory minimum for anyone who rapes a child under the age of 12, a senior citizen, or someone who is developmentally disabled. So, I think we need to still be a tough on crime state. We've had a 44-year low in crime in the state of Florida. That's a result of our tough on crime stances. And I think it's always responsible to review the laws we have on the books and see how they're operating. But if you look at the scoreboard, if you look at the safety of the people of Florida, the policies that Jeb Bush put into place, like 10-20 life for people that commit gun offenses, they've had people committing less gun offenses. There's less gun violence in Florida. The people are safer, and so I don't want to do too much to change that which is working.
What about nonviolent stuff? I think.
What's nonviolent? I mean, someone who's a meth addict could kill you for $40. I mean, the fact that they haven't committed a violent offense yet doesn't mean that they haven't engaged in conduct that leads them to be more likely to hurt somebody.
Yeah, New York City was this glowing example after Rudolph Giuliani became mayor of the broken window policy, that when someone commits a seemingly petty crime, if you deal with them in a way that they know that they've done something wrong and they're detained, taken off the street, it leads to a reduction in the much more violent crime, the things you described, murder, rape, that sort of thing. And now we're seeing, because of the abandonment of that policy, New York City is no longer that glowing example of a large, clean, metropolitan, safe city. They're losing that reputation, and I would attribute it to the fact that they've backed away from their tough on crime policy, and I don't want to see the state of Florida go down that road.
I would rather that we deal with crime on the front end instead of on the back end. The viewer had the opinion that a crime's been committed, now let's do something to forgive that crime. I would instead say let's go on the front end, and there's organizations throughout the state of Florida such as Associated Marine Institute, when they will take troubled kids who are in trouble and will put them in an environment where they will look at behavior modification. If we spend more of our efforts in that end, then they won't become criminals, and we don't have to worry about getting them released early or sooner. It's unfortunate that crimes are committed and people then have to go through the process of having their rights restored. But if they would simply think and not commit the crime in the first place, we wouldn't have to deal with that question at all.
We know that about a third of the people that go to prison will never go back. They made a mistake. We do need to do a better job in making sure that when they come back into our system, that we've not created a way that they can't get a driver's license, they can't go to work. They have fines that have accumulated interest while they're in prison that they can't pay because they don't have a job and they can't drive and go to work. So I think we're looking at some of those areas to soften up and make those third that want to be part of our system, want to be good citizens, give them the ability to get back into a working program quicker without all the impediments of doing that.
Okay. Let's talk about guns. Viewer question, since guns in the hands of alienated individuals are a danger to our society, does it make sense to have careful background checks on people who buy guns?
Well, I think it makes perfect sense to make sure that people who have serious mental illnesses, who have a diagnosed condition that would suggest that they are the kind of individual the listener has described, that they don't have access to weapons that can hurt themselves or anybody else. I'm all in favor of that. But the other thing is that we need to make sure that we're not trampling on the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens. People who have a right to carry a firearm, have a right to use a firearm, whether for hunting or personal protection. And unfortunately, in the cases, the tragic, horrible cases that we've seen recently, there's been no evidence that if we tried to take away guns from law-abiding citizens, that we would have prevented what occurred in South Carolina, what occurred in some of these other cases. What we need to do is exactly what Representative Hill said, and that is, as we see somebody who presents with a troubled potential, we try to provide more mental health counseling and assistance on the front end. Organizations like Big Brothers and Big Sisters, the Boys and Girls Club that gives kids a chance to feel like they're belonging, to be part of a safe environment, head them in the right direction, scouting, I mean, those are things that people don't want to talk about because they involve actually doing really hard work as opposed to passing a bill and doing high fives. But it's those culture changing efforts, including mental health counseling, that we need to do to try to prevent people from doing extraordinarily horrific things. Taking guns away from law-abiding people doesn't solve crime.
Okay. Anybody want to add to that? Okay, very good. Here is a question regarding divorce/alimony. What is the likelihood that the bill establishing guidelines for alimony duration and payment amounts for divorcing couples will be vetted early next legislative session and finally passed? Do you think this area of alimony reform will ever have a retroactive policy passed which will end permanent alimony at retirement of the payer or automatic reduction of benefits to the receiver when he/she reaches Social Security age and is then eligible for Social Security benefits based on former spouse earnings?
I will spare all of my married colleagues the risk of answering that question and the likelihood that their spouses are watching at home. I'll say
By the
this.
way, I'm good, Vicki. Yes, it's all good.
We need alimony reform in this state, and alimony reform bills have passed the House and the Senate, but they have not married up. And the governor has taken a view that he will not sign any alimony reform that is retroactive in any way. I disagree with the governor on that issue. I think there are some folks who are paying punitive alimony, and we need to have a system within our family law structure that allows people to be rehabilitated, but that there is some end to that. That you don't have a situation where people are stuck paying, $10,000, $15,000 a month for the rest of their lives after a spouse has been appropriately rehabilitated. So we're working through those issues. We've got a lot of bipartisan support for some meaningful reforms, and hopefully we will deliver the governor a bill that will have an effect going forward, but I am not optimistic that there will be a retroactive element to that legislation.
Okay, we had actually two questions on that, and one of the viewers said it amounts to a life sentence, regardless of who caused the breakup.
Sounds like someone who is in quite the pickle.
Okay, well, speaking of marriage, a little different topic here, but in the ballpark, same-sex marriage. My understanding is that the Supreme Court decision requires clerks of court to perform same-sex marriage, but does not require religious institutions to do so. Is that correct? The viewer wants to know.
I'm not sure. I think that may call for a judicial opinion. I don't know that the Supreme Court's decision in this matter has had a chance to really be tested through the trial courts. I don't think so. That's a really good question, but in my judgment, as a non-lawyer, I don't believe that any pastor, rabbi, or priest can be forced to perform a wedding ceremony or a funeral that they don't want to perform.
Yeah, no, the viewer is absolutely correct. The Supreme Court decision only dealt with government conduct, not the conduct of non-governmental entities like churches. And as we discussed earlier in the program, Florida's got some of the strongest laws in America to protect our clergy, to protect our institutions of faith so that they are not forced to do that which is beyond the scope of their particular set of religious beliefs. So there would have to be a whole nother set of challenges to Florida's existing laws before anybody that is not a part of the government would be forced to participate in weddings or marriages that they didn't support.
Okay. Here's a question on economic development, and the viewer wants to know, why don't we have industries like, and he names a couple of major companies there, I won't mention the companies, but major manufacturing companies in the Panhandle. What are you doing to bring business here? And I think this particular question is geared towards major industry, Fortune 500 type companies.
Well, here's the good news. The good news is that just a few days ago, the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, announced, and I was able to be there joining her in the announcement, that BP and the state of Florida and other Gulf states had come to an agreement in principle on the economic claims and the environmental claims arising from the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. Florida will get $2 billion in economic damages. This is over and above the amounts paid to individuals and businesses, over and above the amounts paid to local governments. This money goes into something called Triumph Gulf Coast. Representative Gates actually drew this up after doing some independent research on how we could create a lasting endowment to promote economic development. The first tranche of that money, $300 million, will go into Triumph Gulf Coast, which will be governed by a series of 5 trustees, none of whom are politicians, none of whom are involved in politics. who can make investments and who can look for economic development opportunities that are real game changers, big economic development opportunities, not marginal ones. So that's the good news. The good news is that out of a tragedy, now we have an opportunity that could change the lives of our grandchildren in economic development. This is on top of tens of millions of dollars in economic development funds that we've already brought to Northwest Florida through the Oil Spill Recovery Act that I sponsored and that all of us on the dais here tonight supported, that created over 4,000 new jobs that we can document. So we're moving in the right direction. We can do more, and over the next few years, Triumph Gulf Coast can do a great deal for game-changing the economy in Northwest Florida.
The senator's absolutely right. And so, you know, when we were elected, or most of us were elected in 2010, we have a little staggered timeline here, but the state was in trouble, and, you know, we were in a terrible financial position. Governor Scott was elected, a conservative legislature was put in place. We totally retooled the state's economic development engine. Enterprise Florida was given new life. We actually eliminated a government agency in the Department of Community Affairs, and you can imagine that eliminating a government agency feels pretty good, and it does. But we breathed new life into that, and now for the first time in a long time, we're in the game for some of these game-changing companies to come here. And so I think we'll see some. I think, you know, we've put money into business advertising. States like New York and California, viewers probably see those advertisements that they put forward, and they're selling a lie. We have a great business environment, all the attributes that the state of Florida has. And so as we start to tell that story, we'll start to see companies locate here. It's just a matter of time now.
And adding on to what Representative Ingram said, what we have to do, and everyone on this dais here agrees with that, is we need to create an environment to want to bring businesses here. And you do that by reducing unnecessary rules and regulations and taxes. Doing that, and we have aggressively gone about doing that, this whole delegation, that's what's going to bring businesses to the Panhandle and to all of Florida.
I believe a major global company headquartered in the Northeast recently said, let's take a good look at Florida due to taxes, if I'm not mistaken on that. A viewer question just handed to me. Do any of you gentlemen support same-sex marriage?
Absolutely not.
I do not.
I don't think any of us do.
Is
No.
that safe across the board? Okay. Another question here. Please explain why illegal aliens are given in-state tuition rates in colleges in Florida.
Because
Well-
we lost the vote.
Yeah, because the five of us voted against it, but there were more people who voted for it, and the governor supported it, and that's why.
Yeah, I mean, it's
A
simple.
bad bill.
Simple math. There are 120 members of the Florida House of Representatives. 6 of us live in the Central Time Zone. There are 40 members of the Florida Senate. 2 live in the Central Time Zone. So this was an issue where parochial interests to the east and south of us prevailed on a vote. We did all we could, but now it's important to toe the line against creating more of a magnet for illegal immigration in the state of Florida. We'll fight against it with all we have.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit more about the environment here. Viewer question, how will you personally assure the citizens of Pensacola that you will not, or I should say will hold the FDOT's feet to the fire with regard to replanting mature trees at the I-10 Scenic Highway interchange? How can you as elected officials use your position to demand accountability for clear cutting of historic oaks in this area?
Well, we've got people here who can speak to that issue because they live in Pensacola. I can say that, first of all, the legislature doesn't supervise the Department of Transportation. They don't work for us. We don't hire them. We don't fire them. We don't tell them what to plant and what to cut. They work for the governor. And so the viewer needs to let the governor know that this is a real issue. But the thing we can do is try to have influence. And, you know, I love the old oaks that we have in our area throughout Northwest Florida, and I'll certainly do my part to advise and encourage the Department of Transportation. But in real terms, the viewer needs to talk to the governor.
Okay. Would any of you gentlemen here in Pensacola like to comment on that a little more? Or?
Well, one of the primary tenets of those who are in office is to be good stewards of our environment. And I'm sure that what the Florida Department of Transportation, what they're doing in terms of around the interstate, the work, part of their plan is always to make sure that proper vegetation, trees and so forth are put there and replaced after they have done their work. And I'm sure there won't be any exception to this also.
Okay. We have roughly 4 minutes left, so what I want to do is give each one of you sort of an opportunity just to kind of sum up what your thoughts are on the 2015 session and what you're optimistic about in the future. And I'll start with you, Representative Broxson.
Well, I think Senator Gates said it well. The subject that we're going to have for the foreseeable future is health care. And hopefully this coming year we're going to have an opportunity to work with our Senate partners to come up with a realistic solution that takes care of our most needy, which we're doing, but also does not put our budget in jeopardy for the next 30 years. I think this is going to be an important issue as Obamacare continues to mature. Florida is in the situation where we have a population that demands a lot of health care. We can't spend all of our dollars on it, so that's what we're going to be doing, is trying to find a way to leverage what we have.
I have about 3 minutes left, so I want to get each of you in.
Yes, sir. I think what our citizens are looking for from this delegation is for us to provide good public policy. That's all they're looking for. And for me, good public policy consists of 4 things. One, is it constitutional? Do we even have the authority to do it? Is it fiscally responsible? Is it fixing a problem or creating another problem? And finally, is it morally sound? I think everyone here on this delegation can agree that by adhering to those principles, we can provide that good public policy for our constituents.
Representative Gates?
Yeah, we got to keep cutting taxes. You know, after cutting taxes by $500 million, we got a $1.2 billion surplus. This year, we cut taxes by over $400 million. The more money the people have, I think the better Florida will be. That has been what has led to prosperity in the past, and I think we ought to keep doing it.
Absolutely. Continue to cut taxes, regulation. 3,000 regulations we've cut since we've been in office. The economy's back. It's going to continue to thrive. I'm looking forward to the 2016 session and continuing to do the things that have put us on the right track financially.
And lash education to the realities of the economy, making sure that whether it's community colleges, state colleges, universities, or K-12 schools, that what we're doing creates an education that has relevance in the economy so that students can go further and faster and that they can get jobs and they can be successful here in Northwest Florida.
Okay, and the 2016 session will be upon us before we know it, huh?
Yes.
And you say you'll start committee meetings coming up here very soon, right?
September 15th.
In the fall. Well, gentlemen, it's always a pleasure to spend some time with you, and we appreciate you taking time out of your schedules to come in and talk, and we certainly appreciate our viewers with all of their wonderful questions. And I wish we had even more time because we still have many questions we haven't had the opportunity to pose. But anyway, we're out of time. Our guests this evening have been members of the local Northwest Florida Legislative Delegation, Senator Don Gates, Representatives Clay Ingram, Mike Hill, Doug Broxson, and Matt Gates. Senator Greg Evers was unable to join us this evening. Our broadcast has come to you from the Phyllis and Mike Johnson studio over the television airwaves of WSRE TV PBS for the Gulf Coast. Again, thank you for spending some time with us this evening, and we greatly appreciate all of your questions, well thought out questions, and thank you so much for watching. I'm Jeff Weeks. I hope you have a wonderful evening and a very safe summer. Thanks again for watching. Take great care. Bye-bye.